we can just talk a little bit about Spanish Fork City, some of the things going on here. The Planning Commission that I serve on is, our role is really to help with projects that come into the city, help them weed out the wrinkles before they get to the city council. So if we can help, fix little problems, or if more work needs to be done, if we can help with that before the city council deals with the project, that's one role that we have. We also help set some of the policy and some of the conceptual maybe growth for the city. For example, every city has a master plan, and the master plan, has an outline of the city, and it kind of designates what goes here, what goes there, and with most cities you have some residential area, some commercial area, some mixed areas. You have areas for larger lots, smaller lots, higher density, some of those things. So Spanish Fork is like other communities. I think in 2000, I believe the census had Spanish Fork at around 15,000 people, if I remember right. And then in 2010, I believe it basically doubled, 30,000 plus. Now we're just under 40,000, according to Seth Perrin's city manager. So Seth, when you watch this, I quoted you. They estimate we'll pass 40,000 next year sometime. Right now, just to give you an idea of growth, a lot of the growth has happened sort of to the east and a little bit to the south, because that's where the vacant areas are. As you go west, lots of open land out there as well, but you have the highway and you have the city boundary there, and you have the county area toward Benjamin. So not quite as much room to grow out there. Some of the growth, though, is out that way. But as of right now, there are about 1,500 to 2,000 approved building lots, subdivision lots. So to give you an idea, that's a lot of new houses. In a year, I was going to get this before I came, but I didn't do it. I think in a year, Spanish Fork City wouldn't have anywhere near 1,500 new homes. You just can't approve that many, get building permits, and build that many in a year. At least it's just not. That's a lot of new homes. That'll take a few years to build out, and then there will be more added to it, of course. One demand that we have in Spanish Fork City is the demand for higher density housing. When I say higher density, that may mean different things to different people, but when I say that, what I mean is the type of development that's on the very north end of town, even past the city limit in Springville, which is just past the airport there. You're familiar with that project, lots of apartments. And so in Spanish Fork City, we really don't have too many areas with, a 3-story apartment building or a condo complex. We've got a few in the works, and there's a demand for that. Those are some of the more controversial projects, because, you can take a piece of land that might accommodate 10 or 15, 20 houses, but if you put high density there, how many units can it accommodate? Many, many times more than that. And so what does that result in? Many, many times more vehicles coming and going. It's all about the impact, right? The impact. Just to give you an idea of a recent approval we had, you're familiar with the dugout on the south end of town. Well, there was approved a high density type development there, kind of a townhome type development. And, those that live to the west of there, came to the meeting, and they were concerned about increased traffic. You put quite a few new units there. How many more vehicles are going to be coming and going? And will they go as far west as those subdivisions out there? And you've got the elementary school, and so all of those concerns come up every time you approve one of those developments. One thing the city does very well is, as a development is approved, the city considers some factors. How much capacity does the road have? How much capacity do we have for water, sewer, electric? All of those things come into play. And if a person really takes a look at the approvals the city does, they'll find that the city staff just does a lot of legwork, a lot of background work to make sure that whatever goes on the approved project can be sustained. We would never ever approve anything if we didn't have enough water, enough electric, facilities to get out the road capacity, sewer and water, those kind of things. So to all those that worry about some of these approvals, yes, they do impact, the community, but the city never does anything unless, at least on paper and with studies from experts, we can prove we'll have safety, capacity. And in that particular development I was referring to down by the dugout, that road, Volunteer Drive, is going to be widened. If you've been down there lately, it is even wider now, but it will eventually be a much wider road with a turning lane in the middle. And years down the road, that road will be a connector to I-15 when the on-ramp goes there on Center Street. So that's in the works for down the road, but it just gives you an idea of what's necessary to make certain approvals. If we didn't have that road capacity, that project could never have been approved. Let's talk about what's going in over here at Canyon Creek, which is our new development over here. I talked to some folks at the city this morning before coming over just to get some final details. We don't know a whole lot about what's coming in yet, for sure. We know a few things. We'll have where the theater is there will be a Petco, a Ross, and then there'll be some other retail companies we don't know for sure yet. What about a theater? We had plans for a theater there. We had what we thought was a pretty solid arrangement, I think, with the Larry H. Miller Theater. But that kind of, I think that started and then it stalled a little bit. So as of now, the city is working with up to 4 groups that we think one of those will have a theater there. So don't worry, we will have a theater. We'll be able to provide the movies and the popcorn for the community. Couple other things when it comes to some of this master plan and the zoning and so forth. Cities are like other business entities. They need money to do things. If you feel like Spanish Fork is a nice place to live, take a close look at what you like about the city and you'll realize it all costs quite a bit of money. If you want nice roads, curbs and gutters, sidewalks, trail system, parks, open space, think about the open space we have with the soccer fields and the baseball fields, really all over town. That costs a lot of money. And how do the cities earn their money? Well, we're here at Macy's today. Macy's is a major, major contributor to the city's funds. All of the sales tax we get from what's purchased here helps the city, move along. And for years, I think Macy may have been the top. I don't know, Bill, if that's right, but very much a major contributor to the city. Well, now that you've got the development, you have other retailers as well. You have Walmart, Costco, and you have just the other stores. So all of those things will add to the city's ability to handle the growth, but provide the services. We didn't have quite enough money to build a life center, I guess, but that's a debate for another time. And that might be a good example of really what's good about Spanish Fork. The city has some big plans, big ideas. We always want to be out there, make ourselves ahead of the curve. But the residents of the community understand also when we need to pull back. And in that case, they just felt like, hey, a little bit too expensive. I think the feedback the city received was, the idea is great, but the concept people just didn't feel like they could afford it. So anyway, that's a simplified maybe way of explaining that. You've all heard about the hospital that's supposed to come in over here. I was told this morning that we expect work to begin in 2018. There was some talk about beginning in 2017, but it looks like maybe more like 2018. But a few years from now, that whole area there is going to be different, and it'll be a good thing. There will be some traffic issues we have to work through, and particularly with that intersection there where Burger King is and the Chevron station, that'll be a little bit of a bottleneck, and we have to make a few changes. But like I said earlier, the good thing is the people with the city, together with help from UDOT, because that's a state road and a highway and everything, there will be a lot of smart thinking that goes into that, and they'll make the best they can of the intersection. Couple areas that are maybe considered future commercial development, future growth. You have the Revere Health building down here now on the Benjamin, I guess that's the way to refer to it, the Salem and Benjamin exit there, the interchange. So we expect some more development to go in there. There's a lot of interest. Right now it's the interest phase and the negotiation phase, so to speak, but probably going to have some significant new stuff going in down there. And when that happens, of course, that will expand our requirements for water and sewer and electricity. So it'll be interesting there. A few weeks ago in Planning Commission, we heard a proposal to make 2550 East, going across the highway, across the railroad tracks toward Maple Mountain High School. You know that road there? So there's a proposal to make that area commercial. And to the west of there is mostly vacant land now, but we know that it will fill in with homes, eventually. And so when you think of commercial property, usually you need a close proximity to a major road so you can get off and on easy. You wouldn't want to put a high traffic, either a development for housing or a business that has a lot of traffic. You wouldn't want to put one of those, over here where you have to drive through lots of neighborhoods and create lots of, if you can help it, lots of traffic for neighborhoods. What you'd like is to have it right here by the major highway where you hop off and hop back on. And so we only have a limited number of areas like that in the city. That's one of them. The Benjamin Salem Exchange is another. On the north end of town, just because of growth that's already been there, some of those spots are kind of taken. It's some of industrial areas there. But we do expect for another interchange to be put in, if you're familiar with Smith Auto there, the Ford dealership. Right in that area, eventually there will be an off-ramp from the highway. So once that happens, what will happen? Automatically will spring up some commercials. So those are all things that have been discussed in the public meetings. Yeah, Mike?
Well, speaking of TV, you can watch the debate about the 2550 East rezoning on TV. I guess you knew that.
Yeah.
And you have all the...
I got beat up in that meeting pretty good, actually.
I don't remember. You have all the residents up there that have recently purchased homes or bought homes, and they're all in there and they're just crying. They don't want it rezoned.
Right.
And of course, you have the landowners that want it. That's got to be tough.
Yeah.
You're not getting paid enough to sit on that committee and make that decision.
Well, I appreciate that. You're right on. The residents in that particular instance did come to the meeting, and hey, I can understand their concerns. They've got their neighborhood there. It's a nice neighborhood, and the thought of having a commercial development there with hundreds of vehicles coming and going and increased traffic, and it's difficult to say what will happen when you get a development. You never know exactly how it will go, but some studies show standard increases in certain things, and so we know that we have to be prepared for that. And it's never easy to have the city grow, so it's kind of tough, yeah. But that's a good point. The Planning Commission, our meetings are the first Wednesday of every month, and then I don't know when they're aired, probably after that day, a few days sometime. So
they're aired over and over and over.
Over and over. So if I ever watch afterward, I just feel like, man, I don't know what I was doing there. When you see yourself on TV, it's always not good. Let's talk just a little bit about a few I just have a few pieces of trivia for you here. Electricity. We take for granted that when we flip the switch, we'll have electricity. And the city's done really well at making sure the light always comes on when we flick the switch. But you've probably heard in the news in the last few years, some cities during the summer especially had some outages. Do you remember seeing any of that in the news? electricity is like any other resource. It's not, there's not an endless supply. If you want enough electricity, you have to go out on the market and contract for it so that you know you have enough to meet your demand. And here's something very few, well, I don't know if everybody realizes this, but you know, you have a continuum of the day, you know, beginning and end, and as you go throughout the day, you have certain times when people are using a lot of electricity and certain times when they're not. And so as a city, you have to be prepared to meet this high demand. Whenever that peak is, you have to be prepared for that. Even though the rest of the time, it might be significantly less in demand. And so as a city, you might say, okay, overall, we need 100, we'll call them units. These terms get technical in electrical, we'll just call them units. But if you know as a city you use 100 units per day, you might say, okay, we'll contract for 100 units and we'll make available this many per hour and we're good because, you know, 100. But what we have to realize is it might be very few, then, whoo, you know, big peak right there. And then, so the city has to always be ready for that big peak. And in order to do that, they have to have, you know, substations around the city, kind of strategically placed, and those substations have a certain reach. They can put electricity out to a certain, you know, customers a certain distance away. As of right now, if one of the facilities goes down, they can shift the load, is how they refer to it, from the others and cover. But the ability to do that is getting smaller and smaller because the city is growing really quickly. The east side of town, the east and south, that area out that way, is the area most vulnerable right now. So if you live out there, don't make your don't make your substation go dark. They can still cover it. I don't want to have anybody worried, but the city's very good at calculating. Okay, where is our breaking point? And right now the city has plans. I'll just read off a few things here. In 2008, there were 8,750 residences that we supplied power to, and 1,130 commercial facilities. That has grown about 8 to 10% since then every year. So think about, you know, how many that is. Let's see. So the cost, if I interpreted this correctly, the cost to meet the needs as we project out the growth is going to be about a $15 million cost for electrical facility type projects. That's not all at once. It's phased in over years. That's new substations, upgrades to those we have. But it just gives you an idea of, you know, the level of cost. So how is that paid for? Well, when a person builds a house, they have a building permit and they pay a certain amount of money to build a house. If you're a builder, you go into the city and you get a building permit. And it's not quite as simple as you just get a piece of paper that says you're good to go. It's broken down into quite a few things. And so it costs, I should have gotten the cost for that, but I want to say it's around, I better not say because if I'm wrong they'll get after me, but it's more than $10,000. It's a lot of money. But it includes a cost that will go to these services. There are what they call impact fees. And cities can charge impact fees if they can show a connection to the impact of the new construction to the roads, the water, the parks and recreation. And so there are some smart people that have created formulations, so to speak, that help the cities designate how much money should be allocated to, you know, housing and so forth. So each time you build a home, you pay a little bit of money, a lot of money, so that we can expand all of these things: roads, sewer, water, electricity. It's an impressive thing if you can just kind of get a feel for how detailed it becomes each time a home is built, what the city workers do. Let's talk about drinking water. I didn't write the year next to this, but 9,124 connections. So I'm thinking that's pretty close in time to when the electric was, but that's a lot. The average demand for water as you go throughout the day is 19 gallons per minute. So if you just took the demand, you know, homes, some homes are using a little bit more than others. If you just kind of took the average throughout the day, it's 19 gallons per minute. So, or sorry, 0.19, sorry. So that gives you an idea of, the concept of, for several hours in the day, you may not use water at all. You might be gone to work, to school, doing different things. Other times you're washing, dishwasher, washing machine upstairs, taking a shower, watering the lawn. We can use a lot of water pretty quickly. The total demand of the city as a whole, 6,716 gallons per minute. And I didn't write the year on that, but the projection is when you project out certain growth, the total demand per minute will be 21,783 gallons per minute. So that gives you an idea, 3 to 4 times as much capacity. How many of you are familiar with the concept of acre feet? Acre feet is a term that we use if you've done farming at all. That it's a certain amount of water. So every home that's built, if you want to just take an average, the city requires that 0.6 of an acre foot of water be brought in with the project. So if I'm a developer and I have 10 acres of land I've got my eye on out here on the east side of town, and I go buy that land, and I know that the city has a zone out there that says I can have up to, let's say, 3 houses per acre, so 1/3 acre lots. But you lose a little bit of that ground because you have to have some for sidewalks and roads and improvements and so forth. So let's say I can get 3 houses per acre. So 3 times the 10 acres, 30 houses, let's say. So I have to bring with me 0.6 acre feet of water for each house that's going in. Let's just use that as a rough calculation. Well, luckily, what we have in this valley is we have strawberry water. You've all heard of strawberry water? So strawberry water is agricultural water that was designated for agricultural use in this whole valley, this whole project called the Strawberry Water Valley Project, all through here. And it's agricultural, it's water that's for agricultural purposes, but the Strawberry Water Users Association, you have different entities that help deliver this water. You've got strawberry water, you've got the Highline Canal for areas going that direction, you've got the city that acquires water, the government, the contract is through the government, but bottom line is we've worked out to where we can take this water, which was meant for agricultural use, and we can use it in our pressurized irrigation system. Once that was allowed, this allowed people who own the land to pretty easily supply the water. The water goes with the land, so if I'm that developer, I buy the land, I buy the water with it, and hopefully it's enough for all my houses. If it's not enough, the city's been very prudent in their water acquisitions. They have a lot of water rights, a very large volume of water. So if I need a little more water for my development, I may be able to buy some from some other person that has water, or I can buy it from the city. And I think the city will still sell developers water. I think they have enough that they'll do that. I could be wrong, so Chris Thompson, if he's watching, he might call me and say, hey, we don't sell any water. But anyway, point is if you're a developer, you have a lot of things to think about. It's a huge cost to go build a subdivision. And sometimes we think, well, gosh, this developer is going to go up here and put these homes in. They're just going to make a grundle of money, and it's quick and easy. It's really difficult. And those developers, it takes a lot of work and a lot of cost just to get that thing off the ground. So just to give you an idea, they're required to bring the water with them. And of course, with each home, you have those costs for roads, sewer, electric, and so forth. I have just a few notes here. Trouble with notes is you write them down and then you can't remember the context. But if I've got this right, I think we have about 40,481 acre feet of water in our stock, so to speak, that's available. And so I think that's more or less the amount of acre feet. If you need 0.6 per home, that's 67,000 or so. So that gives you an idea of maybe how many homes our capacity could handle right now. And this number might be a little outdated, but if we're almost at 40,000, that's another 50% growth. So the city has just really done well when it comes to their water management and their planning. Talk about pressurized irrigation. I wasn't even aware of much about this when it first came on. I know that it was a pretty controversial thing because it was a huge cost. And so for those not familiar, people used to have water that could come in for watering lawns and so forth. It could come down through the gutter, the canal, and you could, the waterway, and you could water your lawn, kind of a flood irrigation system. Well, now, our city's growing, and you just kind of have to have more efficient water management. So we installed this pressurized irrigation system. The city has the ability to meter the water. So at some point in the future, when water gets more and more scarce, this metering capability will be very valuable. And it will help people understand how much water they're using and help people, manage their water a little bit better. So we will all be learning about water use as we go along. But anyway, my point about the pressurized irrigation is that system is, it's an easy system through which we can take this water we have, run it in, and everybody can use it. You hook on as part of your building process. Anytime you build a new home, they hook into the pressurized irrigation system. I once attended a water conference in St. George, and a couple of councilmen from other cities, there was this discussion going on in the conference about pressurized irrigation. And a couple of the councilmen said, it was almost like it was this off-the-record thing, in this room. Well, these guys in Spanish Fork City, they had the guts to do this, a few years ago, and it was controversial. We don't dare do it in our city because it just costs too much, and city councilmen don't want to, cause too many waves. We sure wish we would have done what you did, back when you did it. So, point is I think other cities quite often look to Spanish Fork as a city that has set a good standard and has made some prudent decisions. But they're never easy, especially when there's a lot of cost. Now, some that are watching have a valid point, which is, the cost to tap into the pressurized irrigation, to install that, was quite a lot. If I had brought my city bill, it would have a itemized amount you pay for all these things. And does anyone remember what they pay for PI? I can't remember, but. Is it a $15 a month per household plus what you use, maybe, or something like that? So, the city always has some of these things you're paying for. Pressurized irrigation, you have a bond for the courthouse, and anyway, you have those things, and hopefully once they get paid off, the bills can go down a little bit. But anyway, we'll see. That's one of those things that a current city council can say, yeah, when we pay it off, it's going to come off the bill. But the new city council might have other needs for it, and they would be legitimate needs, I'm sure. So I'm getting kind of short on my notes here. How much time do we have?
10 minutes.
10 more minutes. Okay. Yeah.
I was wondering, as you start to build these high-density areas, I'm not aware, does the city have ladder trucks, fire trucks that have ladders, or are they looking into, as they start building those types of complexes, if they're adding that type of a...
Yeah, that's a factor. I can't tell you whether what the city has necessarily, but I know that comes up with the plan, because you have the plan come in and it's a 3-story thing, and that's one of the questions that's asked is, well, how are we going to handle that if we have fire? So that might be another thing that has to be added as far as cost, so that we can effectively fight that. I mean, I know that has come up.
I know that was a problem for Orem a few years back, and they've added those to their rescue.
Yeah.
What about fire station in other parts of town? I just
Yeah.
don't think that with our growth, our Main Street fire station is going to be...
Yeah. I've been a little bit out of the loop on that question, but it has been a question for years. I remember when I was on the city council that even then there were discussions about another fire station. And, it's clear that we have to do something, because when we have to cover, in order to keep your rating when it comes to insurance and different things, you have to show you can respond to a fire or an emergency within a certain amount of time. So as we grow and we get houses farther away, but we're still obligated to get out there and do things, we need to have more proximity. So I just am not as up to date on that. I've just got to think that it's in the works, and I know the city's well aware of it. The cost, of course, would be significant. And then, our fire department, which has worked really well, is a volunteer fire department. It's not a full-time position, paid position with, and if we were to ever convert to that, that would be a huge change. And at some point, I guess, as you get larger, you have to account for all those variables. And
So it should be part of the impact fee then?
yeah, sure. It would just be part of the cost of the growth. No question about it. Another, you referred to the high density housing. There's always a, what do you want to call it, aesthetic value that you have with those. And I know that on the Planning Commission we've gone to Orem, Provo, over to Springville, and I may have missed a time or two when we went out, but we've gone out, and the planning department, community development, I think they're called now, they've created quite a catalog of examples of higher density housing, and it's amazing the variety that's out there. A city is in a pretty good position when the project is in its beginning stages to say, hey, we'd love to have your development in our city, and we need some more of this, but we'd sure like to have you work with us on what we feel is a proper design and setup and so forth. And so, builders, when they come in to build, they're business people. They want to get in, get done, and do their job and do it well, because whatever stays is that's their reputation, what that building looks like. And so they care about it. They care about it a lot. And, there's always a little bit of a conflict between cost and, because every extra cost you have is a little bit less profit. But no builder wants to come in and start a project and always be, with the city. So builders tend to work with the city, I think, on the whole, quite well. If the city can give them some guidance about, hey, this is what we'd like to see. And the planning department has really, if you were to go there, you could actually look at a lot of photos, and they've come up with some real good examples of a variety of just looks, and there's quality. There's types of materials. There are things like, where do you put all the parking, the garage aspect of it, and it's amazing the difference in feel as you go to those types of developments, and you see certain types, and you're just surprised at the difference. And one thing that surprised me on some of these visits was there are a lot of people that have very high-paying jobs that want to live in a small little place. If they're not married especially, they just want a small little place, and the idea of a large community development doesn't bother them at all. I was really surprised at some of the developments we visited over in Orem. The vehicles there, just assuming based on some of the vehicles, a lot of wealthy people. And so I was a little surprised. In my mind I would have thought, well, they just go build a nice house and they'll live there, but not today as much. So there's a little more demand for these smaller units and closer together. Any of you live next to what you would call a high density place at all? Just curious. Now, there really aren't that many in Spanish Fork. In fact, most of the builders would probably say we don't have any at all much here. Let's see. See if I have some more notes on water. I kind of exhausted my water notes. Do you have any questions about the Planning Commission? It's, I think I touched on this earlier, but it's an appointed thing, and we don't really have authority. Once in a while, something comes along that we actually make a decision on, and it's the deciding, it is the decision, but mostly we recommend or not to the City Council. So a lot of times we, like I said, our job is to help the applicant understand areas of concern, and we know what the City Council feels. in a lot of instances, and we can a lot of times convince the applicant to, you know, go back and do a few things differently and then come again. But a lot of what we do is just recommendations, and the city council can city council doesn't have to listen to, you know, our vote is not binding, you know, at all on most of that stuff.
Question. On Canyon Road, I know that's state highway, but has there been any conversation that the city has approached with widening that road and
Yeah,
improving the flow of
that has come up a lot. And those kind of things are, of course, it's all, you have to go through UDOT. And the decisions on that, they're based on, you know, volume of traffic. They have all kinds of ways to verify if you really need to widen. But I'll just give you an example. So there are some empty spaces along that road, right? If you had some new development go in and the traffic were increased and you needed some, you know, you turn off and you get back on. And so, but it's really up to UDOT. There's been a lot of talk about it. I don't know of any plan right now to widen it, but I think it's always available if, you know, if the traffic studies show it needs, and you know, so there's only a certain amount of space there, so. Appreciate being able to talk to you, and we'll see you again in what, a few years or something?